Hello there. This is Matt Hohan. I'm Captain of Operations here at Granbury Volunteer Fire Department. And today we're going to be covering Firefighter PPE and SCBA under FFMA Section 19. This particular class, there's a ton of information that I'm going to throw at you guys. Make sure you're taking lots of notes, and make sure when you show up to class this next week, make sure you bring not only your gear, but also your air packs. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them ahead of time to your department members and officers. And of course, if you can't get anyone, just write them down, bring them to the instructors of your class, and we'll be happy to answer anything that you have. Various types of fire service protective clothing such as structural, wildland, and ARF. Now, you probably have already been issued your structural gear, and you may have already been issued your wildland gear, but more than likely you're never going to have ARF gear. ARF stands for Aircraft Rescue Firefighting. It's very technical and very expensive. And here at Granbury Intergalactic Airport, we're not going to be setting up ARF trucks anytime soon. So if you take a look at the gear that you have right now, more than likely you have a set of turnout gear. That's going to be the bunker pants and the bunker jacket. Along with that gear, you're also going to have a helmet, gloves, boots, and SCBA air pack. Now on the helmet, you may even have two different types of helmets. You may have one that's for firefighting and structures, and you may have a wildland helmet. A lot of this presentation tonight is going to be very directed at our structure firefighting gear. And the one thing that I really want to emphasize when we're talking about our structure gear is it's very important. That is the stuff that keeps you from doing your best impersonation of a baked potato. You need to take care of it. You need to make sure it's clean. You need to make sure it fits. You need to make sure that it's not torn, ripped, or falling apart. Another thing in the consideration in the care and the upkeep of your gear is just the physical cost of it. Your department has thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just invested in the gear that you have right now. And that gear is not easily replaceable. It's very expensive. When you're looking at things like the gear, the helmet's a couple of $100. The Nomex Hood is $35. The jacket's $800. Flashlight can be $100. Gloves, $50. The pager, $500. Turnout pants, $800. Your boots, $200. The total gear package just in the PPE you're wearing can be well over $3,000 for all of it. And then when we get into the air packs, that's when it starts to get expensive. Procedures for inspecting, cleaning, and maintaining the components of your PPE after each use. We're going to just go line by line on this. When you start with your helmet, everyone wants to look salty. They want to make sure their helmet's dirty. And if you're brand new on a department, I understand that you don't want to be the only guy out there with a shiny helmet. That doesn't mean that you run over there behind the truck and try and burn your helmet on the exhaust of the truck and just start randomly dragging it through the fire scene so it looks to be dirty. Your helmet's an incredibly important piece of equipment. You need to make sure there's no major cracks or wear and tear on the helmet. It also acts as literally as a hard hat. So in case something heavy falls and hits you in the head, it's not just going to dome you and knock you out. Another thing to seriously consider is your Nomex Hood. Your Nomex Hood is intended to primarily protect your neck, the bottom of your chin, and then up around your ears. You don't want a very loose-fitting Nomex Hood, but you also don't want a Nomex Hood that's so tight that it's literally cutting circulation off at your neck. Your Nomex Hood will start to loosen up as you wear it more and more. And then over time, it's going to become so dirty that you may not even be able to wash it anymore. And that's something that's a hot topic issue right now in the fire service or Nomex Hoods. I really recommend that if your Nomex Hood is just pitch black soaked with carbon, go ahead and throw that rag away and get a new one. Now, when we get into things like your actual bunker gear, the jacket and the pants, basic inspection on that is pretty simple. You want to make sure that it's free of tears and rips and that nothing is shredded on the outside or the inside of the jacket. Your bunker gear is intentionally layered to protect you. That goes for the pants and the jacket. Your boots, well, boots are like normal boots. Those are going to wear out over time. You want to make sure that there's not any major holes in them, but you also want to make sure that the steel toes still work in them and that you're able to even get your feet in and out of your boots. Now, washing in your gear, it's actually kind of a complicated process. The one thing I don't recommend you do is just take your bunker gear, take it home, and throw it in your personal washing machine at the house. The first thing is your wife or your girlfriend or your mom, she's probably going to kick your ass because your gear is incredibly dirty. But a more important factor on this, that gear has been exposed to some highly toxic atmospheres, and you don't want to be taking that gear home and exposing everyone at your family to the stuff that you're exposed to on scenes. Another consideration, when you're actually washing your gear, wash it at the station and make sure you use the right type of laundry soap. Don't use Tide or some commercial brand because that stuff's actually very bad for the Kevlar in your gear. Make sure you use a product like Citrus Squeeze or anything else that's actually recommended by the gear manufacturer. It's going to help wash your gear thoroughly, but it's also going to help maintain the longevity of the gear. Other things that can be washed are the hoods and the gloves and your bunker pants and jacket, but I wouldn't be throwing your boots in there with that equipment at the same time. If you're going to wash your boots, easiest way to do that is just fill them up with Dawn dish soap and top them off with water and scrub away. Now that you have finally washed your gear, the last part is drying. I can tell you from personal experience, you want to make sure that you take your bunker gear and really stretch it out and dry it. The best way is just to hang it on the side of a brush truck and make sure that it's getting plenty of air. You have multiple layers of cloth all crammed together, and if you just take that gear and fold it back up, and in this area, that gear is going to be highly prone to getting moldy. That mold will destroy your bunker gear. So after your gear is washed, make sure you hang it up and let it air out for a few hours. Limitations of personnel working in PPE. There's one thing I need you to really understand here. Your bunker gear and your air pack does not make you bulletproof. That just allows you to operate for a limited time in an incredibly dangerous atmosphere. A prolonged exposure or an exposure to absolute extremes is going to equal very bad news for the wearer, in this case you. Your gear can fail. Your gear will fail. It is critical that you guys understand that. This gear will not allow you to just waltz right up into an absolute inferno and then walk right in. Most of the gear will fail at anything over 1,000 degrees. Bad news here, most structure fires are well above 1,000 degrees before you ever make entry. Your gear is not intended for you to try and just see at how many scorch marks you can possibly get before you get burned. And it's very, very critical that you understand that. Now, if those previous pictures didn't get your attention, it's there for a reason. I want you to understand that you can get catastrophically burned or even killed while wearing your PPE. It's important to understand the limitations of the gear. Now, the one thing that does allow you to operate inside and the ability to truly understand how your gear functions is the layers of your PPE. And we're going to go through that. Now, everyone's got different gear. Granbury has a different set, and the other 8 departments in Hood County are all going to have different sets. The main things that you need to understand from your gear, and we're going to start from the inside working out, is the face cloth. That's basically the part that's going to be touching your skin. It should be relatively soft, and the main purpose of that is just insulation. The next layer right outside the face cloth, and it's going to be sewn on the inside, is going to be the thermal barrier. That's what's going to keep the crushing heat inside a structure off of you. A thing that's rarely considered but is usually a major factor in fires is the moisture barrier. The moisture barrier is what's going to keep a lot of the hot steam that's generated from putting water on a fire off of you. If that moisture barrier fails, all that steam is going to be coming into your gear. The last section is just the outer shell, typically made of Kevlar. The outer shell is what protects the moisture barrier and the thermal barrier. All of these pieces of cloth together make your bunker gear. Now that we've reviewed the gear, the next thing we're going to start covering is the self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. What are the 4 hazardous respiratory environments encountered in firefighting? That is really a question. Now we're going to go through 4, but you guys will be able to name several just coming off of the slideshow. And I want you guys to think about and write down some answers. Think about the oxygen levels inside the structure. Okay, I want you to think about the heat levels inside the structure. I want you to think about how toxic the smoke is inside the structure. And another factor is the little itty bitty particulates that's physically in the smoke and in the air at the time of a burning structure. There's a lot more, and I want you guys to go ahead and write them down. Use of SCBA in conditions of obscured visibility. This is going to be one of the hardest factors that you encounter as an interior firefighter, and one of the hardest things to actually work through. We're going to practice a lot with you in training to help you work through this, and we're going to show you some tips and tricks on what we use currently to be able to aid us in moving through a structure, not only safely, but quickly, and you'll never be able to actually see anything. One thing I want you to consider, and this is a question, is what tools and appliances and anything else that's at our availability that might be on our engines that actually we can use to help move around inside a structure even though we can't see. Physical requirements of the wearer, the limitations of self-contained breathing apparatus, and the safety features of types of SCBAs. This is kind of an unusual topic to talk about if you really haven't put your air pack on yet and your gear and started to move around. I don't care what kind of shape you're in, good shape or bad shape. Your gear is going to restrict your mobility. You're not going to be able to reach as far, you're not going to be able to bend down as far, and you're not going to be nearly as flexible. The air pack, the SCBA, also significantly hinders your ability to move in and out of a very small space. You'll understand and experience this more at a later date in training, but your air pack may inhibit your ability to physically move out of a window or a doorway. Now, the limitations of the SCBA really comes down to time. There is only X amount of air pressure in the bottle. We don't care about time on the bottle because each person is going to breathe air at a different rate. A really large person is going to consume a lot of oxygen very quickly, and a small person is going to consume a smaller amount of oxygen in a longer time. The other factor that determines this is how hard you're working. You could take the two examples of a really large guy and a really small guy working next to each other, but if they're both working really hard, they will run out of oxygen very quickly together. When talking about safety features and the types of SCBA, what we're really talking about here is the PASS device, or the Personal Alerting Safety System. The purpose of that system is intended for two factors. The first one is a firefighter's in need of help, and he personally sets off his device, and that will alert audibly everyone around him of his location. And the second one is maybe something traumatic happened to the firefighter and they're currently unconscious. Since they're unconscious, they can't set off their PASS device, correct? Well, the PASS device also is motion activated. And what I mean by that is if the firefighter stops moving for a certain amount of time, usually 30 seconds, the PASS device will start to go off on its own. It's usually really annoying when you're standing around outside, but it's vital to a person that maybe succumbed to a medical or trauma injury inside a structure fire, and they're incapable of actually setting off their own PASS. Now, another safety system that's associated with SCBA, and not all departments have these types of air packs, but some air packs have a buddy breather. The buddy breather is a spare high pressure hose that comes off of the air pack, and if your partner that you're trying to help or assist also has a buddy breather, they can plug into each other, and now the air packs function as one big unit. Donning SCBA while wearing protective clothing. In a seated position on an apparatus with a seatbelt on, the compartment method, the overhead method, the coat method. What we're talking about here is just getting the air pack on your back after you have your PPE on. Now, in a seated position on an apparatus, what they're really trying to do is say, hey, get your crap on, get on the truck, make sure that you get your air pack on. What's happening, though, nationwide, is a lot of people are forgetting to put their seatbelt on. And the seatbelt not being on, in the event that the fire truck has an accident, you're at major risk of an injury or even death. Now, the compartment method, overhead method, and coat method are ways to put an SCBA on when you're not inside a truck. You're going to use those methods when you're standing outside the truck. Maybe you just arrived on scene and you're getting your gear ready. And we're going to cover those methods in the classroom when we're doing our skills. I'm not going to go into great detail on those right now because they're a technique and a skill. There's no reason to talk of them now. SCBA is in a safe condition for immediate use. You should not be checking your air pack out for use when you're en route to a structure fire. I cannot emphasize this enough. Go through your trucks and make sure your equipment is in a usable condition. That way, when you're actually en route to the call, you know your gear's in good shape. Now, when you're physically inspecting an air pack, you need to make sure that the air pack's actually attached to the regulator through the high pressure line. You need to make sure that all the gauges on the air pack work. Make sure there's no leaks in the air pack. Make sure that the indicating devices on the air pack are actually indicating properly. That may be how much air is left in the pack. That may also be the PASS device. Go ahead and hook up the buddy breathers and make sure they work. In the skills portion of this class, we'll cover this in much more detail. If you have any questions, write them down. Cleaning and sanitizing the SCBA for future use. So you've been on a structure fire, you used your air pack for several rounds doing an interior attack and then much longer on overhaul and mop up. The air pack itself is physically dirty and it's now time to clean it. Let's start with the SCBA mask piece. That mask piece is something that sits just right there on your face and has direct skin contact. Is that something that you would want to use Drano or bleach on? No. I recommend finding a very good iodine solution if you're not allergic to shellfish, or making sure to just use dish Dawn soap. Physically rinse the mask out with hot water, clean it with your hands. Just let it air dry. Also, while I'm thinking about it, never use Windex on an SCBA mask. The ammonia from Windex is very, very hard on the polymer plastic that makes up your SCBA mask. Now, the physical air pack, take it out back, wash it down with a hose, get all the dirt, the grime, the soot, the carbon off the air pack. Make sure you get all the fiberglass out of the pack. Go ahead and physically re-extend all the straps. And when you're reattaching the regulator to the waist belt cup, physically attach it. Because if it doesn't stay attached, you never know what's going to crawl back in there while it's sitting in the truck. Use of SCBA in conditions of restricted passage. What we're going to do is here in either this class or maybe in a few weeks, we'll be taking a field trip and we're going to be going and doing what's called an Scba Maze. An Scba Maze is where we are going to put you in a space that's not necessarily tight, but it is going to be restricting. And we're going to see how well you can maneuver with your gear on and using that air pack. It also helps you learn to adapt at how to move with the gear and how to maneuver with the air pack. Replacement of an expended cylinder on an Scba assembly with a full cylinder. We have a light and air truck here in Granbury. It's called Support One. Support One, one of the primary purposes on it is it has a giant air compressor on it, and we have the ability to actually refill air bottles on scene. Now, here's the first thing I want you to know. If I see you anywhere near Support One and I've never trained you how to use Support One, and then I see you trying to fill an air bottle, I'm going to hit you over the head with the air bottle. You have to make sure that you know how to use the equipment to appropriately fill it. If you don't, you can cause catastrophic damage to the apparatus and potentially yourself. This is definitely a skill that's hands-on, and we'll discuss it more at a later date. Procedure for daily inspections and maintenance at Scba. Now, let's be realistic. We're volunteers. We're not going to do daily inspections on our Scba. Here's the kicker, though. There's no reason that your Scbas shouldn't be visually inspected at least once a month. We're going to go through a very basic expenditure on how to go through the inspections of the Scba. We're going to physically start with the actual air bottle itself. Is the air bottle intact? Does the pressure gauge work? Will the air bottle physically turn off? If it does, take it and connect it to the air pack. Screw in the high pressure line. Make sure that it is nice and secure. When you're tightening the high pressure line, you don't have to be like King Kong when you tighten it up. Just needs to be snug. There's no reason to really just grip down on it with a pair of vice grips and make sure that it's locked in. Moving from the high pressure line, move to the actual air pack itself. Make sure the straps are fully extended all the way. What is the condition of the straps? Are they ragged? Are they torn apart? Maybe the straps need to be replaced. What color are the straps? A brand new Scba strap is going to be blue or gray in color. If it's been exposed to a lot of heat and a lot of fire, like an older air pack would be, that color is going to change and it may become more brown or even bright orange. Moving from the straps, what is the shape of the actual backpack portion of the Scba? Is it cracked? Is it in good shape? Is it bent? These are all factors to take note of. Make sure you turn the bottle on and check the regulator. Make sure air flows out of the regulator properly. Make sure that the purge valve works properly. Make sure that you have the ability to isolate the high pressure line through the decompression valve. Along with the regulator, make sure that you have the ability to seal the regulator back to the air pack straps with the cup on the waist belt. Go through and visually inspect the air pack. If you find a problem or if you have a problem, go to one of your department members or officers and make note of it. Don't just say, well, I'll tell someone about it and completely forget about it. Figure out what the department's policy is with a bad or broken SCBA. They might tell you it's fine. You may have found an air pack that's catastrophically broken and it's still sitting on a truck waiting for someone to use. Your action is very, very critical here. It's not hard to check those SCBAs at least once a month. We'll go through much greater detail on how to demonstrate the correct procedure for recharging an SCBA cylinder. The biggest thing you need to realize is don't ever overfill an SCBA cylinder. Most bottles in Hood County are 4,500 PSI. The bottles that Granbury use are 5,500 PSI. Just realize that if you overfill the bottles, you have the potential to cause the bottle to explode. And I cannot describe to you in enough detail at what that bottle will do to you if it explodes in front of you. Don't ever risk it. Always fill the bottles to the maximum pressure that's recommended on the bottle itself. Don't take someone's word for it. Physically read the bottle and find the maximum pressures. Emergency techniques to using the SCBA 2, emergency preparedness, controlled breathing techniques, and communication procedures. These are skills that will be taught in person and will be much easier to understand and demonstrate when we're physically with the instructors. We'll cover this more later. Operational components of all types of self-contained breathing apparatus. I have covered many variations of components on the SCBA so far, but if you truly aren't familiar with the air pack yet, and you're not really sure exactly what I'm talking about, that's just fine. We're going to cover this more when we're doing the skills portion. Without compromising the rescuer's respiratory protection, demonstrate rescue procedures for the following: a firefighter with functioning respiratory protection, a firefighter without respiratory protection, and a civilian without respiratory protection. All three of these skills are going to be very detailed when we cover them in class. What I can tell you is that at the end of this class, you're going to be very comfortable with the operations of your SCBAs and the different situations and scenarios where you're going to use them. Operation of the personal alert safety system. I've talked in detail earlier about how we would use our pass, but something I want you to consider about, and this is my question to you: what situations would a pass possibly be used for besides just interior firefighting? Does the pass have another use? That's my question. Very last slide. 4,500 PSI versus 5,500 PSI. Here in Hood County, we are lucky that all departments use Scott air packs. Unfortunately, the black sheep in this discussion is Granbury, and we have 5,500 PSI air packs. Again, we're going to discuss that in the skills portion in a much more detail. The good things about this is that our bottles are interchangeable with each other. Just remember, if you have to grab a Granbury 5,500 PSI bottle to use in your pack, you have to bleed the bottle down to 4,500 PSI. Again, we're going to go in much more detail on this here in a little bit.